You're listening to Guitar Talk with Dave and John.
Good morning, or afternoon, actually, or night when this thing finally gets edited. This is Guitar Talk, and I am Dave.
This is John. How the hell are you?
We'll wait for an answer.
Indeed. Leave it in the comments, eh?
So, any gigs this weekend or anything?
The Elvis Simmons and the Memphis Strutters got back together for the first time this weekend since Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back in the rehearsal studio.
That's awesome.
Yeah, planning on a bunch of shows coming up. I think we're going to get our first few in March. So, got to get back to it.
Great.
And that's about it.
So, I had a gig on Saturday, and it went great. Big crowd, was a lot of fun. And then Sunday, I had a rehearsal with my funk band. We went over a new song for us to do by the Jacksons called "All Night Dancing" that I like. Monster bass line in it by Nathan Watts, a Stevie Wonder's guy. But for the most part, I think we're really close to ready for our show on the 22nd, and we have another rehearsal this week, so that'll be good.
Did you use the Kiloton?
I did not. That's so, and I have it here to show you if you want to see.
Look at that. So would you say that with that humbucker placement and everything, that's kind of the GNL take on the Music Man Stingray?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Or the Sterling, exactly. The same thing, yeah. But it doesn't have a preamp. Instead, it just has like a parallel series and a coil split switch, which it's nice, all three. And then the tuners and everything. And the tuners all say they're all stamped G&L. I mean, it's really, if I can quote one Mark Lever, this is a beautiful instrument.
Right.
Now, if I could just do the harmonic and the slide.
Oh, you could do it. You could do it. Yeah. Oh, believe me, I haven't forgotten about that.
Oh, the harmonic and the slide.
Every time I'm with Dave Ross, if we're playing music, he'll do that.
Right?
All for Lever.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, it's funny because I showed a few people here and I kept saying, "Isn't it a beautiful instrument?" And they're all like, "Oh, yeah, it is." And I'm like, that's not the response.
Yeah, they don't get the joke.
It's not the response I want.
Right.
No,
it is nice. You got the mother of toilet seat, as many folks like to say.
Yeah, for the you mean for the pick guard?
Yeah.
Which I do not like. But it looks good on this, I thought. Otherwise, because I generally do not like perloid. I do not like tortoise shell. But on this, I think it works. And I'm like, okay.
It looks pretty good with that royal blue, whatever that blue is.
Midnight blue metallic.
I see. All right. I was going to go with a royal blue, but I'm not relevant to this conversation.
And Mark Lever would once again say, "Isn't that a beautiful instrument?"
This is true. We got to get Mark on the show one day.
Yeah, we really do. We really do. And not let him know that we love that saying and just count
the best.
Count the amount of times he says it.
Is he the one responsible for "Isn't She a Beauty"?
No, I think that was John from R. Taylor.
Oh, yeah. John DiMaggio.
Right, from R. Taylor, yeah.
Isn't she a beauty?
Oh, listen to that buttery tone.
What a sweetheart.
Oh, right. What a sweetheart. Exactly. Oh, Christ. The stuff you endure, folks. The stuff you endure when you run a guitar shop.
So, the one thing I went without in my Elvis practice this weekend was pedals. I just brought my foot switch with me, and I missed some of my pedals greatly. So, for lack of a better segue, let's talk a little bit about pedals.
Well, it's funny you mention
I'm the pedal show.
I have two pedals on my desk here in the box.
Yeah, right.
Now, one is in the box because I want to send it back to the manufacturer, or I'm going to send it to the dump. This is a full tone OCD, and this is the version 2, the official version 2,
Okay.
not the 1.2 that people always call the version 2, but this is the version 2. So this one has the part that you can open up and make this true bypass or not true bypass. For some reason, when it's plugged in, the light is always on. And when I hit the switch, when it's off, even though the light is always on and the effect is off, there's bleed through with the effect. It basically is useless.
So
and I wrote
wrong
them
with the switch circuit. Something.
Yeah, right, with the switch. And I wrote them an email about it. Their website says, make a video of what's going on. Yeah, you know what?
Right.
Like, I bought something, it doesn't work. How about I just send it back and you guys figure out what's the problem? Because I'm not retarded and I can pretty much tell you that the pedal's not working properly. I don't need to make a video for you to tell me the switch is bad. But you know Mike Fuller over there, and I don't really appreciate the way he does business. I don't really like the way he talks to his dealers. And for that, I have been mentally trying to get rid of his shit off my board. So I was watching a couple of videos, and I wanted to see if I could find something that would fill the gap, kind of acting like a Dallas Rangemaster, which is the old treble boost that Brian May used, and other people are known for using it, Clapton and whatnot.
Sure, Bert
And
Lonnie.
so I found this one. This is by Daredevil Pedals, and it is called the Silver Solo. Now, this one, I believe, is the Silver Solo version 2. And here it is here.
Oh, that's cool looking.
Yeah, the only knobs on it are level and range, and the range is the amount of treble you want to add to the circuit.
Got it.
And basically, you put this in front of like any Marshall or anything that needs more breakup, and it gives you that. It basically acts like what a Tube Screamer later did, except a Tube Screamer kind of works to color the sound.
Right.
And this acts really not to color it, but does add like treble and gain. So it's nice.
Any idea what the gain or the treble frequency is? Does it tell you in the literature?
I'm sure somewhere. It says it's a clone of the Dallas Rangemaster, but where the Dallas Rangemaster uses germanium, this uses silicon. And I don't know I really don't know. But the demos that I watched, it sounded great. So I was like, giddy up. So I used the board on my pedal board on Saturday, and it's one of my pedals. I have to go through with them individually. I'm having an issue with one of my pedals. All of a sudden my sound went and just dropped out. And it wasn't like one of the connections was bad. I could tell it was the pedal, something going on there, because the volume dropped drastically. So I disconnected wow, this is in the middle of a tune. Thank God it happened like right before my part cuts out. And I disconnected the effects loop, and it was still going on. So then I plugged it, I put it back in, and then I shut everything off on my board, and the sound was beautiful again. I have a feeling it's the Angry Charlie. I just have that feeling that's the pedal. That something's going on in that Angry Charlie.
Interesting. I know you've had issues with how it plays with other pedals, but I didn't know there were possibly physical issues inside of the pedal. Maybe.
Yeah. So, well, I didn't know either. This was the first time, but that was the pedal that was on. We were in the middle of the song "Lonely Is the Night" by Billy Squier.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah. And it actually did it right in the middle of my solo as well. And I was like, whatever's going on, this is not cool. And I wasn't sure. The only pedals I had on at that point was the Angry Charlie and the Timmy.
Sure.
So I had it down to 2 at that point. And then when I didn't use the Angry Charlie and the Timmy was on with my rock box, I never had an issue the whole night. So that, and then I kind of had a feeling that I was the Angry Charlie. So I mean, if it's something wrong with it, I might have to replace it. I can't have it dying out on me like that. This might be the end of me buying used pedals. I bought it secondhand off of a guy. And yeah, it's just very weird, the whole why it did what it did. I don't know. I don't know if maybe the power went on it or something. And while it was on, I don't know if it's. So I'm going to check the connections. I will go through it. I don't want to say, because it does seem awkward that it was working beautifully the whole night. I played Aaliyah with it. There's only a few songs I use the Angry Charlie for. And it's the version 2. I'm sorry, John. Am I keeping you awake?
It's kind of weird. Every once in a while, I go on this kick where I just get completely off of coffee, and I'm on it right now. So I'm like 4 days in.
Yeah,
about 4 days in with no coffee, and it's gonna make me feel like this for a couple more days. But then I should be like a kid again. That's the thing. That's the thing about it. Sorry, I'm not intending on being like.
Right. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so I really don't know if that pedal is not getting power, which has happened once before. In fact, it happened.
There's a solid chance that the rest of our audience is yawning right now.
Right, but there's two shows ago I did a show in my what's the Alter Ego version 2, the V2.
The delay pedal
stopped working, and I went and moved the charging cable like just a little bit, and I almost think that I need to spray some type of silicone,
maybe like some deoxit. Something.
No, just something to spray to keep it so it locks in and those things don't move when I'm moving it all the time.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The plugs out, yeah, like some type of Oxy Seal or whatever that's Flexi Seal, whatever that stuff is.
Right, okay.
Something more clear. Just so it doesn't nudge, because I think it gets moved out or pinched out. When you're kicking the board around every night. And
as much as you do it, I imagine that things are bound to happen.
And the more pedals you have on the board, the more you scratch your head and go, what now?
Right.
Right. Yeah. I've had a few issues with my Diamond Tremolo, but I think it's in the connector, and it's just the way the switch goes in. And sometimes I nudge the switch and I'm like, oh, there it is. But yeah, I'm getting so sick of all these pedals because it's like there's something that always happens, and I'd much rather run a slimmer board, but you can't if you're trying to do all these sounds. You're just stuck with.
If you're trying to nail the colors, it's hard to slim back.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of, for these type of gigs, have you ever thought of going to like a Helix or something
I
like
use
that?
the Line 6 Flex Tone every now and then. I take that out.
Right.
But
and that amp has never failed. You've had that thing for 12 years.
Yeah, I've had it a long time. I like it. I think it's starting to have a couple of problems, but I don't know if that's just because I'm playing it so low at bedroom volume. Sometimes I think that at that volume it doesn't know where the volume levels feels like it's changing to me, and I don't know if it's because I have it like the lowest it can go when it's right at that cusp. But it's when I bring it out, it's just not as it doesn't exact it as much because you're limited in the Flex Tone 3 technology, as opposed to like the Helix where you could, or if I had like an 11 rack and was running through a computer. But I do love running all the analog pedals and everything. Like I said, it's just like if I had a tech that I could sit there and say, hey, will you go through this before every gig? I'd like that a lot more.
Sure. I get that.
I'd also like somebody to tune my guitars, and for that matter, play the show for me.
And your own
private, I'd like to go watch.
Yeah, your own private ball washer when you're playing golf.
Right. You know what I mean? I'd like the guy to play, and I'll just be like, hey, I'm going to sit in the front row and hear this set.
Yeah. I'm curious what my pedals sound like.
Exactly.
You'll be in the crowd and you'll be like, why can't I hear myself?
Right.
Am I always this quiet?
Well,
Why
it's
is the
funny,
bass player so
we play
loud?
these shows, and sometimes people come up to you and go, "Yeah, the guitar's a little loud." So I'm like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, you can't really hear the guitar." It's like, well, where were you guys sitting? Oh, you're sitting here. You're here. I mean, everyone has a different. It's just you just got to do it and do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in places that aren't playing like a big PA system with
Right.
a good spread,
Yeah, which is
got a
every
nice
place.
spread on it. Anyway,
Every place out here doesn't have a PA. It's not like the LA club scene where every place has a PA, a sound guy, and the sound is at worst very good.
Mm.
Here it's like you never. Yeah, it's like one or two places that have PAs. Other than that, you're like you're doing it on your own.
yeah. You have any pedals on your board that you could live without? This is not exactly a way to approach an endorsement of a product for people that are listening, saying, "Ooh, I want one of those." And we're both like, "I could live without that."
Well, only because of my set. Like right now, I have a Vic Audio 783 Ram's head, and if somebody wanted me to play any solo by Gilmour, that's the one I would engage. Right now, I'm not doing any Pink Floyd, but so I'd hate to get rid of that pedal, but I'm not using it at gigs.
Right.
And
you like that pedal. I know you like that pedal.
Oh, yeah. And then I also have a Jetter from Brad Jetter, an Indigo Fuzz. And that's a great sounding pedal. That pedal will really become something if I put this in front of it, because it loves, when I used to play the AC Booster in front of it, those two stacked, it was like this angry fuzz that was like organic. It was really nice. And I love that pedal. But right now I'm not using it. It's just on my board. Yeah.
Is there a pedal on your board that's just on 100% of the time?
Well, the buffer doesn't even have an off switch. Right. And if I'm not using the Angry Charlie, which is only on maybe 3 or 4 songs in the whole night, then the Fat Boost 3 but from Full Tone and the Wampler Eagle compressor is on the whole show. Those pedals with the buffer. Because the Fat Boost and the buffer to me act as a line driver. I'm using that almost to act like the Cornish LD3. Right. And then it goes into my compressor. And the compressor, I have it on blend, but it's like when I use, and I don't use a hard, like I'm not playing. In fact, I was just talking about this pedal. I had a guy come out to an acoustic gig.
Right.
And we were talking about pedals, and he's like, "You into pedals?" And I said, "Yeah, I got quite a few pedals on my board." And he's like, "What's your favorite drive?" And I said, "I like the Rockbox Boiling Point." And he said, "I had one of those. I couldn't get enough gain out of it."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm at the 50-yard line with the gain, and any more than that, and I think it would be a distortion, and I didn't want that. And I just found that funny that that's what he thought. And I was like thinking to myself, like, that's like 90% of what I would use as heavy gain before going into the full-blown Marshall sound of like Stone in Love.
You're running your Rockbox after your Fat Boost.
At Unity gain.
Right, but it's taking a hit from that Fat Boost. Regardless, it's got to be coming up a little bit. I
think no more than if it was the only pedal on the board. Because that's the whole point of the buffer. I mean, the buffer probably does more that brings the impedance really down. Other than that, I don't think the other pedals, because I'm hitting it at Unity gain, it's acting more as an EQ as somebody's pickups would, but I'm not pushing it. It's no more than a Unity gain. But yeah, I think the compressor has some effect on it. I'm getting a little bit more squish with that compressor going into that into the Rockbox. But again, I don't play it for high gain. In fact, do you know the song like One of These Nights?
Yeah.
So all the Don Felder parts, that's like what I'm using. That's what the sound that I basically go for is. That solo, when I put the Timmy on after it, that's which gives it a hair more gain. That's what I'm doing for the solo for One of These Nights. So it's really not a high. I mean, it's not high gain at all. It's just like, most people wouldn't like to play that sound.
No,
Yeah.
I understand I understand exactly what you're doing. And you're running that all into the face of the amp, right? There's no effects
Yes.
loop. Are you using the effects loop at all?
Oh yeah, the effects loop. So I use for the effects loop, I have the Univibe, the chorus, my tremolo,
Hmm.
my phaser, 2 different delays and 2 different reverbs.
And you're running it in the loop, but you're running the amp clean.
Yes.
And okay, interesting. Because I'm thinking of a lot of guys with like blackface amps or plexi style amps where they're driving the amp with a pedal, but the amp is naturally clean, so and they don't have an effects loop. They can just run those time base effects into the face of the amp because it's clean.
Right.
But
Yeah,
you're
no,
running clean and you're still choosing to use the loop.
I use the loop because I don't want any drive to affect the amount. In other words, if you go through the face and all of a sudden you step on a drive or a boost, that delay is going to get a lot louder. I don't want the delay to because you're driving.
You're hitting the amp hard enough to make the amp start to break up a little bit.
Well, no, you're hitting the delay harder first.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like the effect, the boost is going into the delay. So now you're hitting the delay harder. And now that you're hitting the delay harder, all the effects are going to come out harder. But if you hit the delay with the exact same signal every time, which is the signal in the effects loop, you're going to be fine. And that's what I do.
So did you build your cables into like a loom to make it a little more organized, or do you just run 3 cables as an output from your pedal board to the amp and then a send and return from the pedal board?
So I have a snaked cable that's all one that has 3. Right. And I'm running 2 different boards.
Right.
So I run what's it called? The pedal train, the PT2 is my drive board, and the PT Junior is my my effect loops board.
So you just have those next to each other, and you've got enough space at the end of your loom to break it up, basically. Yeah. I did the same thing. I built a loom out of. Let me show you. I'll show you.
All right.
Ta-da! All right. Yeah. So we've got, 4 things here. One of them's for a foot switch. Took some heat shrink around the end there, and then this stuff. I don't know if you can really see this braiding
I have
stuff.
It. Mine's gray on it.
Yeah. Okay, but
who made mine was Travis made mine.
Oh, okay. Oh, so that loom you've had for a long time.
Long time.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wish it was it called like Tech Mesh or something like that. I wish that we could plug it for the guys out there listening right now because it's a really cool product to have. It's one of those things you might not think of, but making a loom for your pedal boards, it just keeps everything so much tighter and more organized. And you don't want to have like a mess of cables all over the stage around you when you're moving around. One cable bundled up, much better.
Yes.
We have to figure out what that stuff is called.
Makes my setup easier. It's like I used to, and sometimes I still will, depending on if it's much further away, the amp, then my individual cables are longer.
Right.
And but for the most part, I can basically just do a quick setup, and mine are all labeled. It'll say send, return, amp, and then on the other side, the opposite of send and return.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, it's and the amp is still the amp. I mean, it works really great. And I'm using a Hot Rod Deluxe, and the clean is pretty damn clean. So like when I'm playing, and I also have an AC booster, which I love the sound because if I don't put the Timmy on and it's just the Fat Boost, the compressor, and the AC booster, it's going to have like this glassy, clean sound. And then if I step on the Timmy, now all of a sudden we have like Sarah Smile, that type of lead tone. It's just real nice. I dig it.
Very cool.
I dig it. Yeah.
My board's pretty modest. I'm not going for all the colors and things like you are because I'm not trying to do as many covers.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just the beast that I'm...
I gotta say though, the one thing that's a bummer about my board is the reverb. I've got the Omni reverb from Keeley, and the plate setting sounds really, really good.
Mhm.
But there's something about both of the amps that I have here that I use to where you have to barely, barely, barely crack the level on the Omni to get it usable. Otherwise, it's just a giant wash.
Right.
I don't know if you have any tips or tricks on that, but
that you're not going through the loop.
I am going through the loop.
Oh, you are?
Yeah,
Really?
both amps. Yeah, both amps. And the thing is just so hot that if you run it with any level of depth at all, you have to keep the volume almost all the way off on it. You crack it open just barely, and it sounds like Devin Townsend, sort of like big washy reverb. But yeah, I haven't found an amp that pedal really likes yet.
So
it
the
sounds
reverb
great,
I'm using,
but if you accidentally bump it, it's like
I'm using the New Neighbor Echelon. No, sorry, the Echelon's the delay. The Seraphim. I'm using the New Neighbor Seraphim, which is basically the wet reverb. It's called wet,
right.
But the Seraphim has the like the keyboard sounding tail, if you want to put it on it, the shimmer, if you will. That shimmer.
Yeah.
Where it's like, so I just keep the shimmer off, except in one song. And I'm using just the Seraphim Mono Reverb by New Neighbor, and it sounds phenomenal. And then if I want that big washy reverb, I'm using the Trinity 2 by TC Electronic, which is the ethereal reverbs. And so, like, what's cool is if I want to get that super wash, and I use it a lot in, like, I'll use it on Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. On that board, I'll have the tremolo, I'll have the delay, and then I'll have this washy reverb. So when I do like the volume swells like he does, not only is it pulsating with the tremolo, but it's this beautiful wash. It's great. And I'm using that for that. And then the only other time I would use something where if I wanted a wash sound is sometimes I have my Echelon delay on, and I'll put on the alter ego with a dotted eighth long delay, and that'll also give you that wash if you're doing if you don't hear the attack note and you're fading in, it'll have that Holdsworthy kind of thing. And that's about it. That's so I use 2 and 2. I'm using two reverbs and 2 delays.
Right. Yeah, I've got 2 delays on my board as well. I just use the analog and a digital.
Right.
Both are Boss. I've got the DM2 from Wazacraft and the DD3. And the DD3, I just generally set it to like about 5.5. So you get that longer delay, and the DM2, I'm setting to about 350.
Yeah.
Just something a little bit shorter, but it's both of them are just there to add space to the sound. I don't really have much of a method to like syncopate anything. It's all space.
I will say if somebody wants to, on the cheaper side, want to use more than one delay, I would highly recommend the old DL4s that you can find used on Craigslist or Marketplace. You can pick them up for like $100, and it has 3 delays that you can program with one of the buttons. It's 4-button unit, and the last one is tap tempo. And those really work well if you're doing something where you need more than one type of delay and want to have control over the sound.
Do you still have yours?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. In fact, I have it on a board that is like, I have an all-inclusive board, which is like delay and drives just together. It's like if I want to use my night train, or if I'm plugging into an amp where everything's going in the face. It's a small board that has
right on.
Yeah, I mean, it has I have the Analog Man Mini Bicomp as my compressor on it. And then I have the Klon clone on there. And I also have a I'm trying to think of what the pedal is. It's the one that Steve Lukather uses. It's called the Bomb Distortion by Jeff Coleman. Is on it. And then I have the MM4 from Line 6 and the DL4. And, it's kind of like the board initially was when I was started playing more lap steel. I wanted to have a separate board and a separate amp for it.
Yeah.
And so that was basically my lap steel board. And but some gigs I bring it and I have my other singer who plays guitar in a couple of songs use it, because otherwise he just plugs straight in and his tone is like, it needs something to be desired.
Uh-oh.
Well, no, he knows it, so he's like,
he's listening right now. No, he knows it.
Right. Yeah, he knows. He messaged me the other day. He's like, any way you can bring that extra board for this gig? I'd like my sound to be better. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Let's switch it up a little bit here, because I read something funny this weekend. First of all, I heard the new song from Dream Theater, and I couldn't have been more bored with it. It's just like, who cares? I know a lot of people out there like these guys. I used to like them a lot. I still like the earlier stuff, but like the stuff that they're still trying to do, it's like anybody else who's been around for a long time. At this point, it's just a formula. They get 2-3 minutes worth of song, 6 minutes of circus, and then they close it with 2 or 3 more minutes of song, right?
Right.
And that's pretty much how they operate these days. It's not all that interesting, but somebody that was posting this and showing me, hey, look at this new song, was commenting on his sound and what an iconic sound he has and yada, 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 and talking about how great he is. And I happened to be forcing myself to learn some Poison songs for this Elvis Simmons and the Memphis Strutters gig.
Okay.
And so, of course,
forcing is a good word.
Yeah. And so I threw out the joke that CeCe DeVille is a better guitar player than John Petrucci because he's a better songwriter.
Right.
Now, I will say Poison songs were simple. Bret Michaels is terrible. And CeCe's not a great guitar player. I have a feeling those guys, if they had the songs that they wrote, and they were just a songwriters group, and they gave them to other artists who were better performers, they might have had some good songs. There's a little bit more simplicity to it and everything.
I always found their songs to be ultra derivative.
Of course.
No. But I mean, it's like not even original at all. So the only way you could package it is package it in the ridiculous band that they are. But I mean, if you look at what was the what was that song?
Oh yeah, Talk Dirty to Me.
Okay, yeah. It's She's Tight by Cheap Trick.
Yeah.
Just go look up She's Tight by Cheap Trick. It's the same damn song.
That's
then
hilarious.
you've got that's right. I Know a Little by Lynyrd Skynyrd. They just keep taking like all these iconic riffs and like saying, hey, let's make it our own. It's almost like if you went to listen to Night of the Long Knives by AC/DC, and then within the first minute of the song, you have to ask yourself, how the hell did they not sue Motley Crue?
Right, you were talking about that before.
Because it is Dr. Feelgood. And I'll tell you right now, Night of the Long Knives might be the worst song for those About to Rock album. And because it's the last song on the album and no one's really giving it much attention, the guys at Motley Crue were like, let's do it.
Yeah.
The guy probably learned it one weekend and they were like, what is that song? Oh, it's an AC/DC song nobody knows. Perfect. Let's use it.
Let's do it. That's funny.
And how did AC/DC not sue? But I always felt like Poison stuff was always super derivative. Nothing sounded original to me. And now, I will say the same. I remember when Dream Theater first came out and they had that song, Pull Me Under, Pull. Right? Remember Pull Me Under? Yeah. And I was like, here's a band that sounds like Queensryche. But musicianship-wise, they sound like they're light years better.
Right. I would.
That was my first.
Yeah.
That was my first inclination, first image of the band. And I didn't pay them much mind because I always think when somebody had played the record for me, I found the songs to not be as good as Queensryche. And I'm like, this always happens. When people are better at the instrument, it becomes so much more about their playing and less about the song. And I always thought Queensryche, especially the Rage for Order album, I always thought the songs were on that record were fantastic. Now, a couple of years go by, and I heard the albums. I think it's called 6 Degrees of Turbulence.
6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, yeah.
Okay, Inner Turbulence. Glass Mirror. Is that what the opening song is?
Glass Prison, maybe?
Glass Prison, you're right. 100. That song is phenomenal. I mean, the playing on it, the song, I think that song is like, if you don't know that song and you're into metal, you got to go back to the Glass Prison and listen to that thing.
That's so funny that you're like, yeah, they got a couple of good ones now. I feel like years ago you couldn't have given a shit.
I haven't listened to this album since it came out.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't care because I think when you listen to that album, it's like, it's still Wankville of, we care more about how we play and sound than we care about the actual notes. And I'll give you the complete opposite of that is Yes. You listen to Yes's, the first big album was what? The Yes album from 70 with, and then Fragile in 71 and Close to the Edge in 72. Those albums, you listen to them, the guitar tone is atrocious.
Yep.
I don't know one person who's ever said to me, I'm trying to get that Steve Howe tone. Nobody is ever saying that, except for maybe the tone he had on Tempest Fugit on the 1980 album on Drama. I love his sound on there. And you could tell all of a sudden he has a real nice tone and he's playing a Strat. But when he was playing that, I don't know what guitar he plays. Is it a 175?
175, yeah.
His and I think he even played some tellies. His tone was always for shit. But what great songs they had. And here's a bunch of musicians who are great musicians, but the songs were still great. Now, when you get to some of the later songs, they start to get a little bit more out of the hook and more into like, and I know there's going to be some people out there going, you're crazy. Tales of Topographic Oceans is their best album. No, it's not.
It's boring.
It loses when you get to, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a good album. I think Relayer is a good album.
I think it's
boring. They lose they lose a little bit because it becomes far more self-indulgent. And even Close to the Edge is a very self-indulgent song, but the hook is so good. You get to, I get up. You're like, oh, this is fantastic. The payoff is great. It's like, it's funny. So I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday, and we were discussing the Rolling Stones. Somebody recently had mentioned to me about Brian Jones, and I think Brian Jones was in the way of the Stones. So many people, there's always the contrarian who's like, Brian Jones was the band. Yeah, or he wasn't, because they couldn't wait to get rid of him. They couldn't wait to put him on other instruments. And when the band came into their own, and when they really developed into the amazing band that they were by Sticky Fingers, that he has nothing to do with the band.
Sure.
So, but we were talking about this.
When was he replaced?
Well, he was kicked out of the band in '68 and died a few weeks later I think he drowned in a pool. Jeez. Oddly enough, Keith Richards' footprint was found on his forehead. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
No, he was a mess. He was a mess. He started the band, he named the band, but they were a cover band at that point. And when they became into their own and writing songs like on the album like Aftermath, which is like 66, that's all Mick and Keith. And by the time 71 rolls around with Sticky Fingers and they become a phenomenal band, that has nothing to do with Brian Jones, and that is all, the Stones as we know it. And even Mick Taylor, who was great. But
now, when did Ron Wood join the band?
Ron Wood joined the band in '76 for the album Black and Blue.
So Mick Taylor was playing guitar between Brian Jones and Ron Wood.
Mick Taylor was in the band. He was he came in during Let It Bleed. He was a full member for what was that album? Sticky Fingers, Goat's Head Soup, Exile on Main Street, It's Only Rock and Roll. Mm-hmm. And then he left, and there's a bunch of people who filled in and did recordings for the Black and Blue album. and and Ron Wood came in for the Black and Blue album, and then they ended up choosing Ron Wood to be in the band. But he's not the only guitar player like on that album. In fact, there's a couple of solos by this other guy. I can't for the moment think of his name, but I'll put it on the bottom. But he they recorded for those sessions a song called Worried About You, which was on Tattoo You. And a lot of people don't know about the album Tattoo You is there's a lot of songs. They threw that album together by pulling a lot of songs that never made it to the earlier records. So Slave is a song that Mick Taylor plays guitar on Tattoo You. And Worried About You has this guitar player that was auditioning for the Stones, and this was the third song that he played on, and it made it on the Tattoo You album. Anyways, that's the song me and my girlfriend were talking about. She says it's her favorite song, well, one of her favorites, and she loves the song called Worried About You. And it's funny because I listened to the song and it does nothing for me. It's a good song, but she gets like emotive about it. She's like, the lyrics really get to me. And I've just never found a Stone song that does that to me. And there's other songs, that do that. And I said to her, it's funny. It reminds me of Zeppelin in the fact of like, to me, it would be like Down by the Seaside where, it's a slower, or That's the Way. I've heard people say, oh, isn't That's the Way a gorgeous song? Yeah, it sounds pretty, but lyrically, I'm not like, it doesn't say to me, oh, these lyrics are killing me. Whereas the Blue Nile, Let's Go Out Tonight,
right,
kills me. It's like, it floors me lyrically and emotively. It does stuff. And again, this is another plug for the Blue Nile. But their songs, Saturday Night, Down by this,
they're
Downtown great. Lights, Over the Hillside. There's something in the melancholy of those songs and the fiber of that songwriting where I'm just like, ugh. And I'll tell you another, Robbie Robertson has a solo album from 1987. And I got to tell you, I could give a shit.
What is the name of that record? I had it, and
it's just called Robbie Robertson.
Oh, okay.
I could give a shit about the band. I never liked them. I never cared for them. I like the movie The Last Waltz. I think that opening, Don't Do It, is a cool tune, but I just don't care.
Right.
And that Robbie Robertson solo album, every song on it moves me. I think it's phenomenal.
What was the name?
Believe it's all for nothing.
Yeah, what's that song called? I remember that song.
Fallen Angel.
Right.
With Peter Gabriel in it. And then it had a Showdown at Big Sky. It had Somewhere Down the Crazy River.
Wow.
It had
Somewhere Down the Crazy River was good.
Yeah, it had a Testimony. It had or Testify. I Will. It had what was the one he did with U2? Didn't we break the silence, and didn't we?
I don't remember that one.
Sweet Fire of Love. Breathe in the sweet fire of love. Great song. Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow
was really
Stewart
good.
Tried to destroy by singing it. And the funny thing is, the second album with him, with Robbie Robertson, the second album, the Blue Nile is on it.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the Blue Nile is also Paul Buchanan and Liz Fraser from Cocteau Twins does one of my favorite Peter Gabriel songs, Downside Up. They do a duet on the album. I think it's called OBO or OVO. I don't know what it's called. But yeah. But anyways, going back
Peter Gabriel's got a few songs that hit me that way.
Oh.
He's the guy. He's my guy.
Yeah, great. And again, I could go back to Worried About You. And I asked my girlfriend last night, I said, what is it about this song that does it? She goes, the lyrics, listen what he's saying. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I don't know if it becomes from Mick. Or it's just the sentiment doesn't hit me the same way. I'm just like, I don't get it. I mean, it's a great song. Folks, if you don't know the album Tattoo You, check out Worried About You. And the guitar solo is a nice solo, and I will put the guy's name down here. I forget his name already. Wayne something, maybe. I can't remember. But anyways, it's a great song. The Stones have some great songs. They just are not the type of songs where I'd say, oh, this just pulls at my heart or hits me. It's funny because I just don't get it. And it's funny when you see somebody connect to music that you don't get, because I'm not saying I'm right by any stretch. I'm not saying I'm right. I mean, I said that to her. I'm like, I don't know if that I'm right. I just know that it doesn't move me, and I'm interested in why it moves you, because the whole idea of a song moving you is an interesting concept, because
Sure.
I can play the Blue Nile for people, and I will say most people listen to it and they're like, oh yeah, this is killer. And you will find that the few people that listen to it that's like, yeah, I don't get it.
Right.
And it's interesting.
Different
I
strokes.
Yeah, it's different strokes, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, I guess it's like, you know, it's almost like movies, because I'll tell you a movie that I hate and everybody loves it and thinks it's great. I cannot stand The Shawshank Redemption. I hate the movie. I hate the idea of a prison movie. And if you're going to give me a prison movie, give me Lock Up with Stallone. Great.
You want canned heat. Something.
I love that.
No,
stuff.
yeah, I hear you. I like Shawshank, but it's
I
different
hate it.
strokes. I mean,
Yeah.
I like The Naked Gun, and my wife doesn't think it's that funny. I should
I
throw her
speak-
out the window. Yeah.
Sad stuff. The Naked Gun. First of
The
all, The
best.
Naked Gun, the Police Squad TV series. Have you seen the shows?
Of course.
The individual shows are so absolutely brilliant. Frank Drebin. There's nobody better than Drebin.
He's the best. Now there were a number of like odd shows that you kind of introduced me to years ago, like Frank Cannon, for example.
Oh.
Watching Cannon
So,
There
folks,
are
just so
scenes-
everybody knows, John and I used to be roommates.
years ago.
And in our, in 2009?
9, 10.
Yeah, or maybe going into 8. I think he
Maybe.
moved in 08. And we used to do cigar and bourbon night, where we would have friends over to come over and have a little bourbon, smoke cigars, and watch Cannon. I used to have them on DVD, and by used to, I
best.
mean, I still do.
Right.
The show is so entertaining. It's about an overweight police detective. Well, no, sorry, an overweight private detective who was a cop for 10 years. And for somehow that 10 years experience has given this guy more experience than anybody that we would have ever known.
Oh
about.
yeah. He can drive a big rig, he can scuba dive.
Mr.
If it's-
Cannon, how did you get a helicopter license? I was a cop for 10 years.
Right.
Oh, that automatically assumes you have a helicopter license.
That
It's
is
interesting
so
how
funny.
that works. He would
I'll never forget.
People couldn't miss him. People could not hit him with a gun, and he could barely open his eyes, and he was shooting. He also had a gun range in his living room in the apartment on Sunset. Oh, it's unbelievable.
So good. There were some scenes. No, it's just funny because this points to like the different strokes thing. I could watch that scene of him going backwards off the boat into the water for that scuba diving scene, and then all of a sudden the guy in the scuba outfit, who's his body double, he's like 6'6" and slender under the water, and he's swimming toward whatever he's swimming toward,
Moving like a
and it's
fish.
right. It's the funniest thing in the world to me. And I've showed Melissa that scene before because I'm like, you got to see this. It's brilliant. And she doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And why is that funny? It's stupid. That's why it's funny.
It's the greatest show. No, it's the greatest comedy not meant to be a comedy of all time. Because every scene is hilarious. Do you remember the one we paused a bunch of times at the apartment? We had everyone over. And there was like an old... Oh, it was like an Indian guy or something. No, it was an old guy who came up behind him, and he threw him down the hill. And we paused it, and it looked like Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest rolling down the hill. We're like, when did this 7-foot guy, like, obviously they just hired the cheapest stunt double, because the original guy was like 5'6" with white hair. This is a black-haired guy that's huge rolling
good.
down a hill. It's unbelievable.
good. Well, this
It's
is like
so great.
Tired of diets that leave you feeling listless, edgy, deprived? Well, finally, there's a food plan you can live with. Introducing the Cannon Nutrition System, designed by a licensed private detective who knows about food. Frank Cannon's system lets you enjoy a delicious shake for breakfast, another shake for lunch, and a sensible dinner.
Good chicken.
And then another shake, and another sensible dinner, plus a shake for brunch. a mid-morning snack, a late-day supplement, plenty of nourishing liquids, additional nourishing solids, and an optional shake for dessert. Other programs make claims about portion control.
Well, what made it one?
They want you to stop when you've had enough.
Oh, well, lovely, Leia. But I just ate.
The Canon system lets you eat what you want, when you want. Best of all, you'll see results in no time at all.
How'd you get that fat?
Look fat and feel great with Canon. Only on TV Land. All the TV, none of the guilt.
This is what was the? What
And the
was
other
this-
great thing
what
about
was
the show
scene,
is-
what was the scene in Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park where they're all of a sudden the drummer's black?
Oh, well, that's because, was it the drummer? No, not the
Yeah.
drummer. It's
No,
Ace.
it was the drummer.
Ace is, I thought it was Ace.
No, it was
Because
the
Ace
drummer.
didn't show up.
No.
Ace was at La Brea Tar Pits, and they had a stand-in double. No, I'm pretty sure it's Ace that's black in the movie.
Either way,
Folks, look that up and see which one it is, but I think it's Ace that's black.
thought
'Cause
it-
Ace was
I thought it
drunk
was
at La
Peter.
Brea Tar Pits.
Oh,
You know who
man.
I love in that, by the way, on that, in Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, Anthony Zerbe, who plays the bad, evil doctor.
Right.
He plays the Torch on Canon. He plays a lot of criminals on Canon. But one of the great things about Canon is like the first 2 seasons when the show was really low budget, any incidental music on the show was just recuts of the theme. So like the theme was now they show Cannon later in the episode walking really slowly in his Barracuda with his hands in his pockets. Remember the Barracuda jacket he always wore?
Of course.
And and somebody on tuba going. I mean, they just playing the theme super slow down because they couldn't afford any other music. Show
so
is
funny.
genius.
It's really good. I have to see it. I haven't seen it in years.
Oh, it's great. It's on every
Anyway.
3 in the morning. Just DVR it on Me TV.
Well, I don't think I have that. I'll have to look it up.
Oh, you do.
But, okay. Anyway, the whole reason earlier I was bringing up CC DeVille is because obviously that's his stage name, right? His name is Bruce Johansson or something like that. And I just couldn't help but to think how funny it is because I'm reading this stupid interview where he's talking about like, oh, this was my stage name because it was my favorite car, the Cadillac Coupe de Ville.
Oh,
And
wow.
he goes CC DeVille. So I started thinking for the Elvis band, I need to have a stage name because the whole thing is so dumb.
Oh, yeah. It's a great band, everybody.
And I thought maybe I could take it one step further and throw the year of the car into my stage name.
You should name yourself after Cannon's car.
Well, what I was thinking, because it is one of my favorite old cars, I was thinking I could be JJ68 Camaro. It would be the dumbest stage name ever.
Oh, it's hilarious.
But it makes me wonder, what would your stage name be if you had to do that? And this really is just a reflection on what's the car that you like.
Lincoln Continental Mark III. That would be if I was Cannon's car.
So you could be DD Lincoln Continental. DD 67 Continental.
What do you get DD for?
I don't know.
I think
it's
the
just-
CC
that's
was
just you.
Cadillac.
Is that what it is? I'm just going DD for Dave. I don't know.
No, it would be LC Mark III.
LC Mark III. That's a good name.
Lincoln Continental Mark III.
If you had a Mark III as a name, it could be a DJ name.
Or was it a Mark IV? It changed cars. At one of the
I don't
years,
know.
it's either a Mark II to a Mark III or it's a Mark III to a Mark IV. Absolutely brilliant show, folks. You really need to watch it.
Gotta check it out.
Yeah, it's up there. And again, it's probably one of those things where half the people will watch it and be like, "This show sucks," and half will be like, "Oh, they totally get it."
Yeah.
I'm still raining my brain on what that Stones guitar player was that filled in. I'll tell
Yeah,
you
I don't
another
know.
great album. One of the
Hit us
best
back on
Stones
it.
albums, if you're a Stones fan. One of the best Stones albums, in my opinion, is Keith Richards' solo album, Talk Is Cheap. I think that first solo album is like the best thing the Stones may have done not in the 80s, because I think Emotional Rescue is my favorite album of theirs. It's either that or Some Girls. I used to think Some Girls was the greatest album, and sometimes Emotional Rescue. It depends on which album I'm listening to. one of those albums, either Emotional Rescue or Some Girls is their best album. It might be Some Girls. Are you familiar with the Stones that much or not really?
Nah,
because that's another thing. So all the Stones, the real diehard Stones fan will tell you Exile on Main Street is their best album. I couldn't think of it being I think it might be their worst album of the 70s. I just do not like it. I think there's way too much filler on there. But there are some good songs. I love Happy. I love Tumbling Dice. Yeah, they were a good band. I have to say that as far as longevity and making good records in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, because I think the Voodoo Lounge album is a phenomenal record. I think they have it as far as being like one of the best bands with longevity.
I'll have to check that out because I am a firm believer in the theory that bands usually, and there are exceptions, the Stones being one, usually don't get more than 7 years.
No, that's exactly. Well, this is my point about the Stones, because Stones have, if you look at the early records, you could go take an album like Aftermath. Aftermath to me is like the Stones' Hard Day's Night. It's when things start to change and you're like, oh, these guys can write. Then you go a couple of albums later and you get into Let It Bleed and you're like, oh, and they're good. And then Sticky Fingers kicks in 71 and you get an avalanche of amazing music all the way to 81. Now they hit the mid 80s, still early 80s, and you got the Dirty Work. Oh no, what's the name of that album? Undercover album. And I think it stinks. She Was Hot was the big song on it. I think it stinks. And then they have Dirty Work. But then towards the late 80s, they come up with, I think it's called Steel Wheels or Bridges to Babylon, one of those around there. And then in the 90s, they have
Voodoo Lounge.
Voodoo Lounge. And then later they have, and that might be when Bridges to Babylon come out. Yeah, Bridges to Babylon. And after that, they have a Bigger Bang in 2005 or 6. And even that's a great record. And I just have a history of putting out a lot of great material and get overlooked. I'd say just to anybody, buy the album Voodoo Lounge and listen to it and think to yourself, this is a band that came out around 63 that's in 1993 or 94 is putting out a great record. And that says something.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
so what are your top 3 Rolling Stones records for us guys that aren't really diving backwards into the Stones?
Well, I'd say I hate to bring up greatest hits records, but
I think we all probably know the
top
hits.
5. I'll give you a top 5. I will say Some Girls, 1978 is a must own. I will say Emotional Rescue, 1980 is a must own. 1971 Sticky Fingers is a must own. Now we get a little into it. I'd say.
Well, that's why I asked for the top 3. You don't have to sweat too hard.
Right. Well, what happens is I would say then get Hot Rocks, which was a collection, the best collection of the 60s stuff. And I would recommend, I'd have to recommend Let It Bleed. You have to have that album. But that would be my, and again, this is totally what I would say, because I could tell you some Stones fans would immediately start by saying Get Exile on Main Street, and I do not like the record that much.
So, okay, let me recap here just so I'm making sure that I'm clear. Some Girls, Emotional Rescue, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers would be 3.
3. Sticky Fingers 3, Let It Bleed 4.
Yes. And if I'm staying away from greatest hits albums,
you said Hot Rocks.
Right, I would say Hot Rocks if you're going to go to greatest hits albums. If you're staying away from greatest hits, I would say it's only rock and roll.
Okay. What record do we see Paint It Black on?
Paint It Black that's either on Between the Buttons. It'll be on Hot Rocks. It's the greatest hits. It's early, 67. 68.
That song by itself is the one song that whenever somebody mentions the Vietnam War, I think of that song. And I think it's because of all the movies in the 70s and 80s. I feel like that song was a part
Oh,
of
right.
that.
Isn't it in Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's in Platoon as well. I'm not sure, but
It's also the end credit song of the movie The Devil's Advocate, which I love.
is it?
Michigan.
That's Al Pacino and Matt
Yeah.
Damon. Is that right?
No, it's Al
No, I'm
Pacino and
Meet Mr. Black. What's Al Pacino and what?
Well, Meet Joe Black.
Yeah,
is none of the above.
No, hold on a second. Meet Joe Black was Matt Damon.
No, it's Brad Pitt and
It was?
Anthony
Oh.
Hopkins.
So much for me.
Devil's Advocate was Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves as the attorney.
Ooh.
Oh, the movie's genius, Kevin.
Was
It's your
Keanu
wife.
Reeves at all like Ted? 'Cause
No,
he's kind of always like Ted.
no, it's a great movie. I think it's enjoyable. It's one of those movies that I really enjoy.
All right,
And
I'll go back to it.
And I have a problem with Pacino post
Hooah!
post 1980. You know what I mean? I'm like, give me for Pacino. I mean, I love him in The Godfather, of course, and Dog Day Afternoon's phenomenal. Serpico's great. When you get to the hoo-ah stuff and his voice all of a sudden started going, Kevin, it's your wife, man. No.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Craig
to-
Gass does a great
Hard to not
impersonation.
like Glenn Ross, though.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal movie.
And
It's
that's
Ricky
like
Roma.
90 or 89 or something like that.
No, it's in the 90s.
Is
It's
it?
I think so. I think it's well, first of all, my favorite actor of all time is in it, playing Sheldon Levine. Sheldon the Machine Levine.
That's
Jack
it.
Lemmon. You've got Ed Harris is in it, who's brilliant. You've got they can't talk to me like this. What's that guy's name? What?
Is it
Alan Arkin.
Alan Arkin?
Right, yeah. And Kevin Spacey's in it.
Yep.
Alec Baldwin's in it. It's a great movie.
Right.
And Jonathan Pryce is awesome in it.
Who's Jonathan Pryce?
He's the guy buying the property from Pacino.
Pacino. Oh, right.
He's great. He's great in it. And Al Jarreau sings the theme. How can you go wrong?
Super good. Anyway. All right, you're listening to Movie Talk with John and Dave here.
Yes.
I got to get on with my business here, so let's wrap this shit up.
All right, John, so upcoming shows, we have a bunch of guests coming on the shows, folks. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Each show will be a surprise. We got about 3 or 4 people lined up coming on. And so Guitar Talk's going to be turning it up a notch. Some industry people, some musicians, and some legendary folk as well. John, is always good to see you, and I'll talk to you midweek.
Pleasure.
All right. And
Take
as
it easy,
always,
everybody.
Very good.
You're listening to Guitar Talk with Dave and John.